Hey everybody, Shibby here. I'm going to be reacting to the new dev blog that came out for the 2025 season changes for League of Legends. I'm going to be specifically talking about more of the esports centric stuff. So the gameplay preview, as well as I believe the multiplayer practice tool. So we won't really be talking about the Arcane update simply because I would want to see the full changes to Victor and stuff like that before I want to talk about like maybe how it affects competitive. We also won't be talking about like the ranked resets, the Swift play stuff, or anything like that, right? Mostly just the gameplay preview and the multiplayer tool, and kind of talk about, you know, maybe the implementation of the multiplayer practice tool. So here's the gameplay preview. We'll start it and I'll pause it and we'll talk about maybe some of the changes and what it could mean for pro play and esports side of League of Legends.
I'm RiotGames, lead gameplay designer for League.
And I'm Riot Oberon, project lead of the Summoner's Rift team. Next year, when you step onto the Rift, it'll look a little bit different than you're used to. We want seasons to be a way you can immerse yourself in League, especially once you load onto the Rift. So we have a preview of some of the updates you can expect in Season 1 of 2025.
Yeah,
We're
these are
headed
like
to
gameplay
everyone's
updates.
favorite region.
This is
of
cool
fierce
themes.
fighters, cloak and dagger
Noxus.
magic, and strength, above all. Prepare to be... decimated!
I respect that. I respect that they try to go for these like goofy, funny
Beyond the
stuff,
Noxian
by the way.
invasion of the map, we've also made some gameplay improvements and changes for next year.
First, it wouldn't be a new season without an overhaul to the item system. Just kidding.
Are they actually?
But there are some Noxian-themed boot upgrades, but it's not as simple as
These are
picking them
cool.
up from the shop. In fact, they come along with a new mechanic, Feats of Strength.
There are 3 objectives that your team can claim throughout the game.
Okay.
First Blood, First Tower,
Blood first
and
turret.
first 3 epic jungle monsters.
Okay, so like dragon or
If your team is the
grubs.
first to complete 2 of these 3 objectives, so for example, First Blood and First Tower, your Tier 2 boots will transform into new versions with slightly better stats. You'll also get access to powerful Noxus-themed boots, which you can purchase as a final upgrade. We want Feats of Strength to celebrate
Okay.
early game successes with...
So it's essentially like a best of 3 on objectives, right? Like first objective. So first blood, first tower, and either dragon or grubs. If you get 2 out of those 3, you get like a, I guess like a little like flyer or like a redeemable thing that says, hey, your boots are upgraded to something and you can make them into like some really crazy versions. We saw like all the different forms of boots, I believe. Where was it? We saw all the different forms of the boots here where you're able to like turn them into like merc treads and anything like that. Yeah. See, or like this is probably the new plated steel caps here that
Noxus-themed
look
boots.
pretty interesting. I'm actually okay with this change. I think competitively, and you can tell that they're also trying to like shift this. They want teams and players to fight more, right? Not just in solo queue, but they want it in esports. Can you imagine like how important now First Blood is, right? Getting that gank off, getting a dominant bot lane or a top lane matchup, securing that mini objective for your team so that you can potentially get this like really cool, slightly snowbally, but not super snowbally, like addition to your boots. I think that's really nice, right? Kind of separates the more lane dominant players or like kind of the more mechanically sound players. It rewards the mechanically better players too sometimes, right? As well as the guys that understand like, hey, you know, what are we trading here? Lane swaps. Kind of makes lane swaps a little bit more interesting, maybe kills it. I'm not entirely sure, but you definitely don't want a lane swap because the bottom lane turret, you're going to be able to take much faster. That's going to get you like 1 of 3 of the objectives towards these boots, as well as if you lane swap and you're the team that has your bottom lane on the top side, you potentially lose out on something like dragon that spawns super early. So yeah, I think this is really cool. Promotes early objective control, but also promotes kills, turrets, stuff that allows you to get advantages either in lane or, you know, maybe smart pathing from your jungler. So I like this change. Very cool. It's going to promote more fighting. We're going to see more hype moments in the early game, which is I think something League didn't really have too much, right? I mean, quite typically we've seen like Captain Flowers or other play-by-plays not do a whole lot in the early game. It's a lot about like anticipation and setup and maybe something's going to happen, but this forces things to happen.
which you can purchase as a final upgrade. We want
is
Feats
fine.
of
This is
Strength
cool.
to celebrate early game successes without
Yeah.
immediately snowballing the game out of control. We're
That's fair.
experimenting with different types of power progression to see how it feels for a reward in the early game to open up more choices in the late game.
Yeah.
We're also introducing Nexus turret respawning. An incredibly frustrating experience is just winning a late game team
Okay.
fight only to lose your Nexus turrets. You kept the game alive, but at what cost?
It's true. Very common situation.
Now it feels like your team is doomed to hang around in your base for another 200 years, babysitting an open Nexus.
Yeah.
To give your team a better chance at coming back from these situations, your Nexus turrets will now respawn after a set time once they're destroyed. Now, your team can rally for an epic comeback without having to worry about a backdoor cast-in.
That's funny. Obviously, XPK reference, but I like this change. Not because it doesn't completely prevent backdoors, but it's so boring when a team that defends their base, their turrets are down, but they just have to sit in their base. You've seen it happen so many times where, like, yeah, the other team can like massively misplay, but if they get the Nexus turrets, you are trapped in your base until your inhibitors respawn, or you're trapped in your base until both TPs of the enemy team are down. This happens so much. And the other team that traded their lives away for these Nexus turrets, they respawn maybe 45 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever, and they pick up the dragon, they pick up the third or fourth Baron, however far we are into the game. They pick up all these objectives, and then the next push is so like sad because the enemy team that tried so hard, that did this great base defense, right, now just gets rolled by like whatever the soul is, maybe it's Infernal Hextech, or whether it's Elder and then Baron combo, and then like, oh yeah, now you know this is inevitable, this is going to happen, and the other team just kind of slowly constricts the team that lost their Nexus turrets. This makes it so that the enemy team, can't just give their lives away for Nexus turrets, but they also have to be smart in how they push, how they get objective control, and it forces, again, more conflicts where there wouldn't be a lot of conflict, right? It doesn't force that like super desperate situation where the team that has no Nexus turrets has to like maybe do a Hail Mary, steal the objective, whatever, right? I like this change. Solo queue, obviously, it's going to be really good for solo queue, but in competitive, we're going to see a lot more teams come back from crazy like situations, right? Where they're down like 5, 7, 8K gold. I think this is a really good change. Again, makes it more exciting for esports.
To rebalance some of the vision-related options in the domination tree. 6th Sense.
Okay, so new runes.
Grizzly Memento.
And we'll look at Spider Axe because he tweeted about this,
and
I think,
Ward.
before, or a little bit after the changes, after this video came down. So I'll put that up.
As well as a new addition to the
at
sorcery tree called Axiom Arcanist, which makes ultimates more powerful.
Yeah, I see it. It's right here. So I'm going to bring this up real quick. So these are the changes for Deep Ward and 6th Sense and last Grizzly Mementos. Deep Wards makes it so that the wards you place in the enemy jungle grant them an extra tick of HP and they last longer. That's cool. So it'll be interesting to define what they mean by deep. If it's just wards on like the enemy side of the jungle, that tri-bush where it's red, or like the other, either of the two tri-bushes on either blue or red side, as long as you get it there, is that considered deep? Or is like wards in the blue buff area, the red buff area, like that, is that considered deep? Stealth wards that you place in the river will also be considered deep. And that's cool. So now river control becomes a little bit harder to gain, and it also becomes a little bit easier to hold if you have it there first, right? Because you have to spend an extra auto attack or whatever to clear out that vision. That's really cool. Probably we'll see a lot of supports taking this, maybe even junglers, we'll see. 6th Sense automatically tracks nearby enemy wards if you can't already see it or track it. If you're a melee champion, it'll have a 300-second cooldown, so that's about 5 minutes. And if you're range 360, okay, so that's 6 minutes. Beginning at level 11, this rune will not only track the enemy ward, but will also reveal it for 10 seconds, giving you a chance to take it out. Okay, so just it's that lethality item, right? It's going to be really, really good post level 11. I'm blanking out on the name of the lethality item. I'll probably put up an image of it, but it kind of replaces that. It also makes maybe that item less valuable. Will be interesting to see people or champions like Pyke who both take 6th Sense plus that lethality item, if they can like double stack it, only like one works and then the other one goes, and then like, you can use Trinket. Like Pyke might become like an elite ward clearer if he takes all of those items, right? The lethality item that can clear wards, 6th Sense, and then Trinket. Like, oh man, this is going to be crazy. Last up, we have Grizzly Mementos, which grants an infinitely stacking 5 Trinket ability haste upon champion takedowns. Okay, so you can either get a cooldown on Trinket Ward, Scrying Orb, or Scrying Trinket, or which I think this would be the most valuable for, is Oracle's Elixir. So We're going to have a lot of games where there's just going to be no vision, I think. I feel like that's what we're kind of trending towards. And no vision typically means that we have more risky plays and more like riskier team fight situations. So that'll be interesting. There's definitely going to be more conflicts simply because the lack of wards that are going to be present on the map.
And adding a new item called Bloodletter's Curse. Well, new-ish. It'll look familiar if you've spent time in Arena. But if you haven't, Bloodletter's Curse reduces the target's magic resistance from repeated spell hits, which is sort of like an AP version of
Glaive was the item.
Finally,
Also, that item that they just mentioned, the I believe it's in Arena already, the AP version of Black Cleaver, much needed. I think, I think the fact that you have so many ways to reduce armor in the game, right? With obviously Armor Pen and Black Cleaver, with all that kind of stuff happening, that there was always a need for this kind of item for MR. Yeah, you can go the M Pen route, which is like obviously Void Staff has a ton of magic penetration, Shadow Flame, all that kind of stuff. But I think having that item for, like you said, repeated spellcasts and damage, being able to lower that MR amount, very, very nice. Because realistically, you had M-Pen, and then you had like your tank or your support tank taking Abyssal Mask, and that was kind of the only ways to really reduce magic resistance.
Let's dig into the biggest update of the season, Atakhan, Bringer of Ruin. The new epic jungle monster is drawn to death and destruction. He will spawn only once at 20 minutes on either the top or bottom side of the map.
Only once
at
20 minutes.
Has seen the most champion damage and kills by 14 minutes. To signal where he'll make his entrance, Atakhan's arena will spawn, adding new permanent walls to that side of the map. Atakhan's dark influence will also cause blood roses to grow periodically in the areas where champions have been killed. More death means more roses.
Okay.
Blood roses drop bloody petals for your entire team, which stack any number of times and last through the entire game. For each petal collected, your whole team gains a small experience and power boost. So if you see one, grab it.
Atakhan has two forms, Ruinous and Voracious.
Right.
Higher action games spawn Ruinous Atakhan, who you might want to fight up close and personal to avoid his constricting rings of damage, which creates the perfect chance for an ace and a steal. Killing Ruinous Atakhan grants bloody petals to the team who kills him and spawns a grove of blood roses in the area for anyone to collect.
Okay, so more damage, all that stuff.
Voracious Atakhan spawns in lower action games. He does less damage to his enemies, but as his name implies, is hungrier. As his health gets lower, he gets an increasingly more powerful drain ability based on
he has Fiddle Drain. Oh, so you have to hit him with ranged attacks.
The team who takes down Voracious Atakhan gets a one-time rebirth buff, similar to Guardian Angel.
One time.
So now you really have a reason to force that team fight.
We're introducing Atakhan for a couple of reasons.
That's a lot of information. That's cool. So it's a one-time spawn at 20 minutes. So that's going to force Baron to spawn, I think, further. I believe Baron spawns at like 25 minutes now or whatever. But the Ruinous form is interesting. Increased effects from the Blood Roses, as well as giving like the Adaptive Force, the XP, all that stuff. That's cool. If you take that down, it kind of makes it a little bit more snowbally. It's not like Infernal Charms or the Infernal Soul Embers that you can lose them. It seems like these are permanent. So you just, as you're moving along the river or wherever it spawns, you grab them. Really cool. Mini objectives. The different forms, yeah. Ruinous, interesting for like those high action, I guess like super bloody, like 20 kill games at 10 minutes. The low action one is interesting. One time Guardian Angel allows you to kind of take that objective, and as long as your team is smart enough, you could potentially use that for that next Baron fight, right? That's at 25 minutes or the first Baron. Imagine you're a team that has the Voracious buff, essentially the Rebirth or the Guardian Angel. As long as you play somewhat smart or somewhat safe, you could get so much out of that, right? Your whole team, they all in on Baron. They go, all right, we're gonna contest this Baron because we have the Guardian Angel. They kill you, but you all respawn on that Baron and you just kill them, right? Like you have it essentially like extra life to play with. You could take objectives more aggressively. You could force team fights like they mentioned. Again, they're shifting the game. They're shifting the viewing experience to more fights, make it more action-based. Like team fighting is going to be so important here.
First, unless you're T1, a 20-minute Baron is pretty tough to get. So we're moving Baron's spawn back to 25 minutes and providing another mid-game macro option in the form of Atakhan. Second, based on how Atakhan plays out each game, We hope to see more different and interesting game states in both mid and late game.
Yeah.
And
just like you talked about, right? If you have the other one where you can get like more adaptive force and it gives you more XP from the roses already, and you have this essentially the ruinous form, if you kill the ruinous version, that just kind of allows you to slowly snowball. I say slowly snowball. It just allows you to like kind of gather more strength for that ensuing team fight that's going to be at Baron, right?
We feel that designing an objective whose spawn location, form, and rewards are decided by how you play should make each game of League feel more varied.
Yeah,
Our
that's
goal
true.
is for every gameplay change to make League better.
And I believe this is staying
As
for
we
the
move
whole
to
season, not just
this
like the
remains
split
same.
one.
So these changes were designed for the long term. That said, we'll keep an eye on how they're landing and make adjustments if needed. But for now, Atakhan and all the other updates are here to stay for good. We can't wait to see how these go as you start your climbs next year.
So really cool thing is that what they could do, obviously this is like more futuristic. And I think one thing we didn't mention was that there was another rune that they're introducing, by the way, before we get into the Atakhan stuff, Axiom Arcanist. It'll buff your ultimate abilities damage, healing, or shielding, and refund you some of the cooldown on takedowns. It will replace Nullifying Orb. This is really scary because unless they remove the actual Axiom Arc, I could see a world where Nocturne goes red tree, he goes Ultimate Hunter, he then goes into the blue tree, takes Axiom Arcanist, and then he first items Axiom Arc. His ultimate cooldown could be like super low rank 1, rank 2, and that could turn Nocturne into an absolutely busted champion. And Nocturne's not the only one, right? Like it doesn't have to be a champion that utilizes all three of those. It could be a champion that just utilizes Ultimate Hunter plus Axiom Arcanist, right? Maybe something like Swain ult. How does that interact, right? Champions with really high ultimate cooldowns could potentially benefit from this, but you have to think of casters that have really low ultimate cooldowns. Electrocute Ahri, right? Red tree Ahri specifically. What happens if she goes Axiom Arcanist in the blue tree, Ultimate Hunter in the red tree, Electrocute like we mentioned, and then builds Malignance? Her ultimate cooldown could even be lower than it already is. Already with Malignance, it's kind of disgusting. And with the Electrocute tree, a lot of things. This is going to be the most troublesome rune, in my opinion, to kind of balance around. Axiom Arcanist is either going to be absolutely insane or will be nerfed so badly that nobody will take it. It's going to be one of those runes. Anyways, back to the Atakhan changes and what Atakhan means. Kind of like thinking into the future a little bit, we could talk about how, as they go into different splits, as we go into different patch changes, Ruinous and Voracious don't necessarily always have to give those buffs, right? It doesn't always have to be a one-time rebirth buff. Maybe next season they go into like a thematic theme of like Ionia, right? And Ionia is all about like peace and like all that stuff. Maybe the Voracious buff, in this case, the one that gave you the one-time rebirth, maybe now it gives you like a massive shield, right? Or maybe it gives increased healing and shielding, something like that. And the Ruinous version, instead of having the Blood Roses give you XP and adaptive force, maybe now the Blood Roses change into like petals, like lotus petals or whatever. And it gives you like extra mana regen or health regen, or it gives you extra health and mana, just like stacking health and mana, something like that. So they could go really crazy with Atakhan and how they change the buffs. I like the fundamental change of having an objective, one-time spawn at 20 minutes that teams are going to fight over. That's an extra objective to fight over on top of the grubs, on top of the dragons, on top of the herald that will now spawn, I believe, at 16 minutes instead of 14. And then at 20 minutes, you have Atakhan, and at 25, you have Baron. So almost intermittently, every 3 minutes or so, and as we get a little bit later, 4 to 5 minutes, you have something to fight over, or you have something to like gain vision over, right? You don't want to lose vision around Atakhan. You don't want to lose vision around the Baron that's going to spawn later. So you're going to get more fights. And crucially, with a lot of these runes that they're introducing, or the new runes that they're introducing, these changes will force, more wards to be disabled or taken out, right? You're going to have less vision coverage if a Pike is going to be taking Umbral Glaive, plus that new rune that we just talked about. I believe it was called Sixth Sense. And they're also going to be taking Trinket Ward. That's going to be really crazy, right? You don't even need all that. You can have just a support that takes the Grizzly Mementos rune, which increases Trinket abilities on takedowns. And then you just have a support that has a really high uptime of Oracle's Elixir, or the Oracle's Trinket. So A lot less vision, I think, is going to be present in the game. We'll see how that goes. That's going to kind of force teams to take more of those like 80-20 fights or like less information, right? Like, oh, I don't know where they are. We don't have vision now. We just had vision now. They cleared it out. We don't have any way to really regain it. Let's take this fight, see what happens. So we'll see what happens. It might have quite the opposite effect as well, where when there's less vision, teams tend to play very slowly. And some of those teams will kind of just play with confirmed information, or they'll play champions that can give them information, right? Ashe, perfect example. Maokai, another example. Saplings and Hawkshot, all that kind of stuff. A lot of different strategies can be implemented, but I am just generally excited for Atakhan and kind of what he's going to bring as both an esports viewing experience, but just as a competitive meta, and how it's going to be like a lot more team fight focused and a lot more focus on like who has better hands, who has better champions, and the best of 3 objectives as well. Going to be really interesting. Can force maybe some really good early game compositions to snowball really quickly, right? And those boot upgrades will be really cool to follow, and how it affects the game and whether they might implement it somewhere else. We're now going to move on. I don't really care about the battle pass. I think it's cool. That's fine. Was much needed. Has been needed for a long time in the league world. Ranked resets. I think they're only doing it 1 reset at the start of the year. That's cool. I know I was super demotivated. I hit Diamond like 2 splits ago. I got reset the split after Diamond to like Emerald 4 or something like that, or Emerald 3. And I was just kind of like demotivated to climb. And then I got reset again to like, I think Plat 2 or Plat 3. And I've just been super demotivated. So 1 ranked reset, completely cool. That's fine. I want to talk about the multiplayer practice tool. We'll hear what they say. And I'll talk about like maybe potential implementation.
You've told us that it's a useful but somewhat limited way to get better at League. The most common desire we've seen people bring up is to practice with other players, whether it's in one-on-one duels with a friend or on a full team fight drill with a pre-made team.
Practice tool wasn't built with multiplayer in mind. And we've had some questions about how League could be a lot less fun if the optimal way to get better is to spend almost all your time in practice tool rather than playing real games.
That's people will always play real games, man. Like it doesn't, people will practice stuff and you'll get scenarios, but at the end of the day, practice is only practice. Like people will still play real League of Legends games because you can't rely on what the practice tool, or in this case, the multiplayer practice tool can do, right? You can't rely that this person is going to play this scenario out in this way. They could go for something crazy like a flash something or a teleport. Like players are unpredictable, so you need to practice the unpredictable as well. Like I don't think that'll ever be a reality, by the way.
But we do think we've likely been too cautious here.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're going to be giving multiplayer practice tool a try. You should see that on the PBE soon. It's an experimental feature, and we'll probably encounter an interesting range of bugs. That said, though, we're looking into whether we can ship it as part of season start in January. And if that's not on track, we'll give you an update as to where it's up to.
Before we wrap up, one last season.
Okay, so they didn't give too much information, and they didn't give too much on what the multiplayer practice tool could envelop. Smart from them. You don't want to make kind of like false promises and be like, oh yeah, you'll be able to like rewind scenarios and you'll be able to play it out again, or you'll be able to like have the enemy 5 champions placed and they're going to do their exact same thing, but your champions can then do stuff differently and the team fight will play out differently, right? Will be interesting. They didn't promise a lot. I'm hoping they can launch it by the competitive season start into the first season, or like the first season of play or the first esports season of play. That'll be really, really big for Riot. I think it'll reinvigorate the competitive scene. It's so dependent on when they launch it and what is available, right? Obviously, like a short laundry list of things that you'd arguably want available. The ability to replay scenarios, the ability to, have multiple people in it. Obviously, 10 people, not just 5. The ability to like limit how many people. Maybe you just want to play out a laning phase, and so you can skip forward to, hey, let's skip forward to 5-10 minutes with this power spike. I'm on this item, you're on this item. This wave. Let's replay it. Let's do this 1v1. They fight. Okay, let's rewind it back. I want to play it again. I want to play the Renekton versus Jax matchup again. Or I want to play the Gragas versus Jax matchup again. I don't have to wait 14 minutes. I don't have to wait for multiple wave states and items. I can just go in, play this 1v1, which is something you can kind of do already, but it's a little bit more difficult in the custom game. If they allow that, teams will exponentially get better. Specifically, Korean and Chinese teams will use the fuck out of this tool, and they will get so much better. I'm sorry, NA and EU, I'm sure you'll use the tool, but I just historically, when the stuff has been given to these players, Champions Queue is a big thing for North America. They've used it, they liked it, they kind of used it, and then they dropped it really, really quickly. Korean and Chinese teams, if this tool, multiplayer practice tool, is as in-depth as I'm imagining it, where you can completely replay scenarios, you can skip forward into games, you can potentially take a replay and put that replay in the multiplayer practice tool and potentially play out those scenarios again. That would be the biggest thing. But we'll just kind of see how this has to develop and see what's actually introduced. And obviously, this is something that when they introduce it in the beginning of the season, they'll probably add more features as long as pro players and even the general audience, the general League of Legends community uses this as they clamor for more. This tool only gets better if there's buy-in from both the esports side and the casual community side, but mainly if there's a big push from the esports side, all the competitive teams, if they want more features, they will provide more features, right? Like, it has to be a back and forth of that, of like, hey, we use the multiplayer practice tool, here's how many hours we like, boom, 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 and then like they'll add more tools. So I'm very excited about this. A lot of the changes into this first, new season of 2025, into the first competitive season, make things very, very interesting. We'll see how these play out. I'll probably do more of this as they do more dev updates and as we get more information on things like Victor, things like Atakhan, even more, like as they release this stuff. I'm really interested. I'm excited for split one of competitive with all these changes. Hey everybody, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the content, I'm going to tell you something you've heard a million times before. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications on my latest uploads. I try and respond to every single comment on my videos, as I genuinely enjoy talking League of Legends esports with everybody, and I appreciate everybody that takes the time to leave a comment. If you want to see more of my content, I stream over on Twitch about 3 to 4 times a week. We talk roster moves, VOD reviews. We also play League of Legends on that channel if that's more your jam. So if you want to see more unedited versions of these videos, or if you want to just see the videos live, that's where you'll find me. We also do short form content both on YouTube Shorts and TikTok, where you'll have more condensed version of these videos, as well as videos dropped on the latest news from League of Legends and League esports teams. So if you're into doom scrolling and all that sorts, that's where you'll find me. I'm also on Twitter, and all of this information will be in the description box below, as well as a pop-up that'll form on the left or right side of the screen here. I appreciate you guys, and I hope to see you in my next video.